Good morning, folks.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Howdy.
Well, actually, I get my chance to say good evening today.
Oh, where you come from?
I'm at the J Focus conference in Stockholm.
Awesome. Getting my windows set up. There's a tiny chance Bob joins, but most likely I will be chairing the meeting today as vice chair while Bob is traveling. And I do see Jory here. Wonderful.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Let's see.
Give folks a few more minutes to trickle in. I see a lot of the participant list is still growing. So. As a reminder, if you would like to, you're all welcome to list yourself on the attendees here. I'd love to ask for a volunteer for taking notes. Would anyone like to put their hand up and have that role today?
I am happy to assist Ava. I will probably have to leave a tiny bit early so that I'm on time for our first meeting of the morning, but I will be glad to assist in the meantime.
Thank you so much, Dory. From having a light agenda, we have possibly a little bit more of a packed agenda now. So thank you to everyone who either reached out to me on Slack or dropped some notes in the doc overnight to fill out our agenda for the day. I will try to just keep us moving through this. Some of these do need a little bit of time. Looks like the attendee list is still growing. I'll give it another minute or so. Nice full meeting today.
Wow, David, I just realized it's you. I haven't seen you without headphones in like years at this point.
Thought they were part of his head. Like a cyborg.
Wouldn't be David unless he was muted for a second.
Yeah, I had to unmute myself. Yeah, I'm over at this LF all hands thing, and the headphones are a pain to travel with. So hopefully the sound isn't too bad.
Actually, the sound is surprisingly good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think Zoom has a headphone filter, just saying.
That's funny. David, if you could use the virtual headphone filter, that would just make everyone more comfortable. I'm just kidding.
I've actually tried it. What it makes it look is that I have blurry, occasional lack of ears.
Or the cat filter, whatever.
Cat ears.
Cat ears might be an improvement on me.
We did just get one more person joining, but the attendee list has slowed down its growth. We're 4 minutes after, so let's go ahead and get started. Everyone, welcome to TAC meeting on 3rd of May, 2022. As usual, this falls under the Linux Foundation antitrust. I don't have a slide for it, but y'all know what I mean. It's up on the website. And the agenda is linked here again in the chat for folks who are just joining. Feel free to add yourself, add comments. We sort of, Jory is our note taker for the day, but we often end up having a little like a side dialogue happening either in the Zoom chat or in the doc, and that's totally welcome. For the start of the agenda, I would love to get an update from Jory on the OpenSSF Day. That's happening co-located with the Open Source Summit in Austin in what, about 8 weeks?
Yes, I don't have my phone on me, but
six
I would
weeks.
have the countdown timer for it. So it's going to be here before we know it. Would love to see everyone there. This is a add-on event to the Open Source Summit North America. And I did do some investigation into what the virtual experience would be like. It's going to be the exact same as OSSNA. So as you go to register for Open Source Summit North America, you can choose to register either for an in-person ticket or a virtual ticket. As a reminder, if your company is a member of the Linux Foundation at the silver level or above, you can get a discount on that ticket. So you can reach out to me or someone on the events team to hook you up with that discount. The events platform for virtual is going to be Excel events, and you will receive an email that kind of describes what that experience will be like for you. But the OpenSSF Day events will be on that platform as well. So when you sign up, you can choose to add OpenSSF Day as one of your add-on options and join us virtually if you are not able or interested in joining us in Texas in person. We are hopefully going to finalize and put up the schedule this week. We're all here, staff are in Scottsdale at an all-hands meeting for LF employees. So we're going to try, Mark Miller and some of the events team and I are going to try and find some time to do that. But we've got, I think, a really great set of speakers. Many of you will be there speaking. So very grateful for everyone's support and quick response a few weeks ago. There'll be an after event and some goodies for our OpenSSF community members like you all too. So please let me know if you have any questions or if you're having any trouble finding information about the event. I'd be very happy to help.
Awesome. Thank you for the update, Joy. Anyone have questions about it? I see the note from Phil that it is just under a hair under 7 weeks away. So come up real soon. Cool. Moving on, I'd wanted to spend a little time reviewing the working group and project charters. I know Krobe and David and others have been going around to all the working groups, asking them to create a charter, write it down, put it somewhere, and then cross-linking it back here to this doc. Thank you, both of you and everyone else who's been doing that. I would love to turn it around to either or both of you to share any comments, thoughts, feedback from the process as you've been chatting with the working groups.
I mean, I can quickly start. I will say that one challenge is the current draft, the suggested charter with the TSC process. The problem is no one has ever done that, so it's a big jump. I've been trying to get people at least identify the scope and the leaders. Maybe it might be useful to try to write down what people generally are actually doing, which is, at least up to this point, has been more of a, if you showed up for more than X meetings, then you can vote. I mean, it doesn't have to be that process, but something so that they don't have to, everybody doesn't have to recreate. But I mean, that's up to script. Chrome.
I'm going to defer to Vicky because I thought she posted an interesting question.
Oh.
Issue. I agree. It's confusing when we wholesale copied that language. And Vicky, would you like to? What a cute little kitty.
Sorry, he's new to the household, and so I'm trying to make sure he doesn't beat up the other cat. Yeah. Anyway. Yes, so Jason from IBM, Jason K, he and I were working on a first draft of the charter for the Vulnerability Disclosures Working Group, and had far more questions than answers. I believe I may have linked to that in the TAC issue for getting charters for everything. And while we have a lot of questions, I think they shouldn't be answered by individual working groups. Frankly, individual working groups should be setting out their charter, or not their charter, their scope, their mission, their leadership, and maybe their membership, but frankly, determining that membership and every other governance thing ought to be determined by the TAC. Here is how we do working groups. Here is the governance for working groups. And then all working groups essentially inherit that. And then they add on their own special sauce, which is going to be their mission, their scope, things like that. So I think that's actually what should be done. And instead of having all of the working groups going their own direction. Because to start for the vulnerability disclosures working group, I went and I grabbed the charter that they were working on for the best practices work group because, hey, it's the Crow Fest, right? But if nothing else, I figured that would just give us some sort of basis that was the same, but we ended up having to change so many things because best practices hadn't gotten around to doing some of the edits yet either. No, honey, stop. It's not like you're not doing anything else. And I really think we ought to be just doing this all in one spot if we could. And I know that the TAC is very busy with other stuff, but we really have to set the foundation now for the rest of OpenSSF. And I'm happy to help with that because I've already taken a pretty good stab at it, Jason and I have, and see where we can go.
So what I was hoping to get out from that, the work that the 2 or 3 or more of you have been doing is exactly this kind of feedback, a better sense of what things the working groups and projects have in common, what they have documented so far, and what should be decided collectively sort of at the TAC level to normalize across projects and working groups. It sounds like you have a better sense of that now.
I do from 2 working groups at least.
Only test.
Jay, your mic is not muted.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, for 1 or 2 working groups, yeah, I have that sense of that. But
Okay.
I have attended meetings for every single working group multiple times at this point. And while I'm trying to drop some of them because there's only so many hours in the day, when I started dropping them, I noticed that none of them had really made a lot of progress on the charter stuff. And I suspect it might be because they're A, busy with other things, and B, our minds like to slide off of things that we're not as comfortable doing. And I think that might be it. And so if we can make it easier for everyone, that would be great. I think perhaps tooling may have gotten one. I haven't gone to look at what Josh and the tooling group have accepted. So maybe he has some
That's
input
before
there.
my time, but
Oh,
yeah, they
okay.
have a charter.
Jacques, I'll shut up now.
Jacques, I see your hand, and then I have some comments after that.
I say, shut up now is my line. Yes, very briefly with securing software repos, we got the charter, we adopted it, we made a small edit, there was a confusing snippet. But otherwise, more or less as it came in the can, because that was a hard requirement to become a working group in the first place. So we were highly motivated to get it across the line. My general feedback has been what is in the document doesn't resemble the day-to-day operations of any working group that I participate in. However, I recognize that there need to be guardrails to deal with times where things are not as usual, when there is a dispute that cannot be settled by consensus alone, but has to be decided by vote. And you'll still need a mechanism like that. Otherwise, it just becomes everything bounces to TAC every time, which might be a little overwhelming.
I agree to that, but I think that's the sort of process and mechanism that the TAC should define and the working groups use. And then if they can't reach some sort of consensus, then and only then should it be bumped to the TAC. But from what I've seen in the working groups, it's unlikely that things are going to get to that stage.
So Vicky, Jacques, and maybe Krob, would this be a good path forward? Maybe the 3 of you put together a list of things, sort of a diff against the current charter template that says, here's what's working well for groups when they adopt it, and here's what is either needs to be clarified or just whole cloth added or removed, but what's the diff? And then bring that back to the TAC as a set of recommended changes. with enough notice that we can invite several of the other working group chairs to come to that discussion specifically. Say, hey, from your working group's perspective, will these changes be good for you? Will they help, remove the paperwork problem that is not fun for you to solve? How does that sound as a path forward?
I'm fine with that. I am 100% utilized until the week of the 16th.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can defer till then, I'm glad to participate, but I don't want to be a blocker. I saw Arnaud had his hand.
Yeah, I saw Jacques give a thumbs up. Vicky, is this a thing you would have time for?
I am slowly but surely making time for, and I think a lot of the work that Jason and I already did for vulnerability disclosure, we can repurpose that.
Awesome.
So I think we've already got a good start. So I can copy that over and we can start to edit on that asynchronously as we have time.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting we have to do this by the next meeting,
sure.
but get it started. Thank you so much.
Totally.
Arnaud, it's your hand.
Yes, thank you. I mean, just a few things. First, I think, it shows the challenge of, creating those charters and templates. Clearly, we have inherited a template that's pretty heavyweight in some ways and doesn't really match what's being done. And we, if you start from scratch, you have to reinvent the wheel. Everybody's like, oh, why do we have to do this again? And I'm the first one to say that. And it's a bit like with the rest, right? For the TAC, we had looked into inheriting the CNCF process. And then we're like, oh, wow, this is so blown out for us. We are not there yet. And so you have to try to find a middle ground between those two extremes where you don't want to start from scratch, but you don't want to inherit something that's so big and heavyweight that doesn't fit and seems completely out of line with what we are doing. One aspect, there is an issue that still needs to be really settled on is whether working groups have steering committees. I know there's been discussions about this, and some of us have said that seems to be definitely heavyweight. I know of one working group that does have a steering committee, which is the Salsa working group. They actually have listed it on their website. If you go salsa.dev, you'll see it. And it was, but there's no rule about how, what's the term, how they get elected. Of course, they started, which is normal. They started with a bunch of people who were there to get things started. But, you would need some process to define how this is going to evolve moving forward, right? Who gets to be nominated, how you get elected, and so on. None of this exists today. And it's not clear to me that we really need this steering committee. The only thing that I know they do is they have some internal discussion, although I don't know exactly what they do. Maybe I shouldn't speak about this, but I know that for the blog post, for instance, they had some internal discussion among the steering committee, whether it's okay or not. So they have some function. Whether this needs to be carried on or it could be open to the group, it's not clear to me. But so there are a few issues like this that definitely need to be settled on. Otherwise, I agree with what Vicky was saying. I think working groups, what I've witnessed is most working groups are very willing to do the right thing. And they have been told, hey, you need to figure out your charter. And they're like, oh, shoot, how do we do this? So the more we can kind of, standardize things, and maybe it doesn't have to be prescriptive and be like, this is your charter, that's how it looks like. But it's like, hey, if you don't know what to do, start from there. And maybe you can have some deviation, but at least you have a starting point, which I think has to be fairly small, answer basic questions and not go too far. And what I have advised some of the working groups I attended when they started discussing this is, for now, just focus on defining your scope, because that's going to be clearly specific to your group. Nobody else is going to define this.
Thank you, Arnaud. I think it's important to have some degree of consistency between things that are organizationally the same type of thing, same item. So any working group should have some common norms as folks, in any foundation move between them. Those norms are really helpful to know what you're stepping into. Ditto for projects, but also with some flexibility. So it sounds like you're offering to help Vicky maybe with drafting that document of recommended changes.
Yeah, I can probably help. Happy
Thank
to
you.
do that.
Thank you. And that's a nice segue to the rest of the agenda of this agenda item, the work that the TAC started now several meetings back on updating our terms and trying to actually map out the organizational structure of the OpenSSF. So I dropped a link in here as a reminder for folks. What we had agreed on in a past TAC meeting was to work in a branch of the repository so we could land things, move more quickly, and have something concrete. There are still several patches open on that branch, which we had wanted to discuss. We didn't, we discussed them in the last meeting, but did not reach a resolution, or I didn't feel like we had consensus between PRs 95 and 96. We had an email discussion. It felt close to a consensus there. So I wanted to bring that back up and see if in the intervening time, folks have made a decision or have a clear sense on PR95 at this point and the terminology used in PR95. Arnaud, since that is your PR, would you like to give a quick summary of what it changes?
I mean, so actually, so PR95 tries to expand from the structure we have today, where we have working groups, but tries to segregate the term project mostly from working groups, and saying projects are really going to be reserved for activities that are focused on developing software. And so then there are other activities, like, you know, the one that I keep referring to is the Great MFA Distribution Project, which clearly was not developing software. We're distributing tokens to, you know, key maintainers. And so this in this proposal would be renamed SIG, right? Special interest groups. And they're under, so there are still questions about, you know, governance as to whether what's happening within a working group, you know, like SIGs and projects are under the governance of the TAC or the parent working group, but that can be decided, you know, as a different issue. The right decision point right now is whether we have this kind of basic structure. And there's a parallel discussion, which is, oh, but by the way, this is kind of reverse from the rest of the world, in at least the Linux Foundation world. And we should swap the term SIG and working group. I am all for consistency, and I am one of the people, I think like Eva and others, who actually live in different organizations within Linux Foundation. And so it's kind of convenient if it could be more, you know, in line with everybody else. But when I looked at the detail personally, I think it's quite, the cost is really high, because we even have like the repositories names, you know, of -WG at the end. And it means you change this and all the clones and everything is broken. I'm really not in favor of that. So I think I did put, I think it's PR98 now, which shows this, what it would look like, but I'm not in favor of it. I think PR95 is the way to go. It's the most, you know, less disruption from what we have today. It does achieve the goal of clarifying. And just so people understand, the key aspect of why are we trying to separate software-focused activities from non-software focused activities is because the project lifecycle is quite different. And we want to be able to define those in a very clear way that won't confuse people.
And to add to that, it's not just that the project lifecycle is different, but that it has semantic value to consumers, to folks outside of the TAC and outside of the OpenSSF, who look at, I'll use a CNCF dashboard, and the same is true of many other foundations and will become true of the OpenSSF over time. They look at the project progression, something as sandbox stage, incubating stage, graduated stage, for a software-focused project that people can download and use and maybe turn into a product that has semantic value to the consumers. And it is important we preserve that, at least in some way, that we make clear here. And that doesn't have any mapping to non-software-focused projects, which is why I've been advocating for using a different term for those, and that's the norm across other Linux Foundation projects as a whole. That's a different use of the word project even right there, which is confusing.
Yes, this is clearly an overloaded term, but that's what we are trying to work with.
At least
I mean,
tease apart
to
some of it.
clarify, there was a PR 96, which was, I actually closed because I thought there was no future for this, which tried, I mean, it tried to achieve the same separation without renaming. And then, so you have to qualify every time. This is a non-software focused project, or it's
it
a
was really
software
cumbersome.
focused project. It's like, this is really a pain. I don't know that anybody would like living in that world. So I just decided, okay, that has no future. I'm going to close it. But
So
I think the one thing, because I don't think Dan Lorent is on the call, is he? Because if there is any voice kind of against the current proposal, it's Dan, who has been saying we should. So in all fairness, I just want to express his opinion. He keeps saying that he only wants us to define the top level. So we define basically the working groups. He doesn't want us to go beyond that. So we don't formally define what a SIG is. We don't deal with their project lifecycle. This is all left to the working group, if you will, which handles these things as, you know, the way it wants.
And having seen this play out in 4 other foundations in the past 10 years, my concern with that approach is it will confuse consumers. If different working groups have different norms for the same terminology, people cannot look at the OpenSSF as a consistent body and trust what we output.
I am agreeing with you, but I wanted to raise
and thank you for
objection
raising it for
to,
clarity.
so
I'm
that
going to
people
try
understand.
something. Since we do have quorum, there are 5 TAC members on the call, I believe. That's quorum. Let's try and take a vote. Anyone opposed to merging PR 95 and adopting these terms as described here? If you're opposed, please speak up.
I'm not prepared to vote yet. I just need to look at the PR more. Sorry.
Okay.
My fault. Not saying otherwise. I just need to have a look. So,
Luke, would you support an email vote then? Or do you just need more time on the
I
call
think
today?
that'd be better. Yeah, sure. Not against the vote. I just need to educate myself a bit better.
Totally fair. I don't want to put people on the spot if they haven't had a chance to review things. I will, after this call, I will open an email vote, and do folks feel that giving it until Friday is reasonable?
I think so.
Hey, Ava?
Yeah, Becky?
For record keeping purposes, would it make more sense to have those votes be +1s on the PR?
For record keeping purposes, I suppose you're right. The TAC has done live votes before, but on the PR does make more sense.
I mean, if you're going to do
because there is a PR,
I mean,
yeah.
Live, if we could do live, that would be great. But and the choice between email or on the PR, I think on the PR makes more sense.
Great. I will send an email that asks for people to go vote on the PR.
Perfect.
Thanks, Vicky. Cool. I think that is almost the end of that. The last one, if folks want to look at it, I had dropped a link in here to a sort of mermaid chart that shows what the organizational structure might look like. It's not complete, but it's a visualization of, if we merge 95, what those terms look like as we start to map out the relationships. So hopefully that helps. And I think that concludes this agenda item. Any other comments or thoughts before we move on?
So one question I have is, are we doing the PR 96? Like, it looks like everyone is kind of opposed to swapping the things. So we are skipping that, or are we taking a vote on that as well?
95 and 96 were orthogonal. We only merge one. And we've already closed out 96 as a non-starter.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Crow, I see your comment. If that'll be quick, I'm happy to pull Lawrence up just in the interest of time and covering everything. Yeah. Laurent, are you here and do you want to go?
Oh, yeah, I am here. Yes. Yeah, thanks. So I'm coming from the best security working group. So we have a draft for security best practices for the NPM ecosystem. And we just have a draft and we want to put it in an RFC mode so people can comment and voice their, their feedback and everything. And I'm looking for a way to advertise this RFC period. And I don't know what the best way to do that is, whether I should advertise on the TAC mailing list or should I look into more, NPM focused mailing list and these sort of things. So I wanted to have some ideas about what you think is the right way or like a better way.
Do we have anyone here from the NPM ecosystem?
I'm not from the NPM ecosystem per se, Laurent, but the OpenJS Foundation has a couple of groups that work a lot with the NPM team. We actually have a Slack channel in our community for NPM community development and feedback and stuff. I would think that that would be a great place to advertise in addition to OpenSSF forums, of course.
I would also suggest reaching out to some of the NPM leads who have occasionally joined these meetings. I know they do make it to some of the working groups. So you might also advertise in several of the working groups and ask folks there, like Justin Hutchins, exactly. Ask folks there to then rebroadcast that call into other lists. I think making the invitation to share explicit helps.
Okay, that makes sense. So can someone share with me the OpenJS group?
I just have to link to that channel in this Slack, actually.
Okay.
And it's if for some reason, when you click that, if you're not already a member, and you have to do, it's the #NPM channel.
Okay, that works. Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot. Yeah, end of my question.
Jacques, I see your hand.
Very quickly, be worth coming to the Securing Software Repos group. NPM folks turn up pretty regularly. And Trevor Rosen and others show up a lot of the time.
Okay, that works. Thanks.
Okay, Arya, I think your topic is next.
Yes, so just wanted to brainstorm with this group on how we can involve more academia or academic research to these OpenSSF. Right now, if you think about it, there isn't any involvement. So just wanted to brainstorm with the group on what could be a process around it. Should it be individual working groups bring in, put in some research ideas and then we reach out? Or should we have, let's say, a proper working group for this kind of research? Just wanted to brainstorm with the group.
So I am aware of several folks who do work with academics and intersect in sort of an unstructured way right now. I wouldn't say the OpenSSF is not involved with academics, but perhaps just that it's not structured.
Yes, so should we involve in a more structured way? So for example, let's say Santiago gets involved sometimes in supply chain working groups.
Yeah.
Fuzzing side, we have offline relationships with Marcel and other folks. But yeah, should it be involved in a more structured or capture those things better?
I saw Jory's hand and Krobe's hand. I wasn't sure which was first.
Go ahead, Krobe.
So the two groups I'm mostly involved with, we've been fortunate enough to have researchers come reach out to us. We actually had a student come present her project and her idea. And we've had a couple professors and their students come in to talk with the groups. So in an informal way, we probably could reach out to those individuals and see how, what their academic programs are and see are there venues that we potentially could reach out and formally engage academia more. I think it's a great idea. It's definitely something I think we should be doing.
I was going to add that I think, as Krobe points out, we certainly do have participants from academic institutions in our groups, but we don't have that documented very well, like how those folks can engage with us. And maybe a low-hanging fruit step one would be some kind of documentation for the research participant, the academic participant. What are some good ways to get involved with our working groups? We have an associate membership at the OpenSSF, which is available to research institutions. And that's sort of like a formal way for a whole university to perhaps get involved with us. But then, of course, as Crow points out, there's the more informal way, which is, hi, I'm a researcher, I'm studying XYZ, I found this group and I would love your input because it's useful to my studies, it's useful to my research. And I think making it clear that we are very open to those folks participating in our meetings or coming to us for feedback or research purposes would be great.
Yeah, my sense, Krober, you're putting your hand up or you?
Yeah, just real quick. I mean, I think it would be interesting to offer that as a service, that we have connections to a lot of communities. So if an academic was interested in doing research on a particular topic, we could help facilitate connections pretty easily through our professional and foundational connections.
Also, another idea there is should we even think of funding some of the research? So let's say we put a set of research problems in every working group and be like, hey, we have set like 100K per working group just on academic research, and that would encourage more academia to be involved.
That's an interesting idea for the board. Yeah. Yeah, Joy, thank you for taking notes. Please make sure we capture that one, because I think that's a really good one that would fit well in the budget proposals, to just say, hey, let's set aside a small amount. David, your hand's up.
Yeah, real quick. In my copious free time, I actually do a little work with in teaching at a university. If you don't mind, I'm going to go reach out to Frank Nagel at Harvard and Aleph Research and see if they have some ideas on this. At least and report back whatever I find.
Love it. Thank you. I don't think a dedicated working group to academic research doesn't seem to be what folks are suggesting, but rather just having a little bit of guidelines documented for how to help researchers navigate organization and connect. Vicky.
I love the idea of some guidelines for researchers, kind of a start here sort of thing, to just make everything easier for them. But maybe consider having a Slack channel where some various members of the community hang out and can at least provide pointers. So I know users-academics or something like that. Users-research, but that means something else, so let's not go there. But I think that could be helpful. It's like, and if you need more help, go over here and we can point you in the right direction. Yay, go team.
Sort of a help desk for routing questions. Yeah.
Or an academia concierge or something. I don't know. We're fancy here.
Very fancy. Pinkies out. Love it. Okay, any other thoughts on that? I see we have 2 agenda items. Jeff, thanks for adding one. That's interesting. I hadn't seen that yet. And Sudindra, I know you'd like to discuss the Persia discussion. I'm happy to hold some time for that. Let's give it about 10 minutes right now. My concern, to be upfront, is with all the work that we were just talking about, the changing terminology is PR95. I'm not sure we're going to have a framework in place, or I don't feel like we have a framework in place yet to say with certainty, here's our process for making a decision. But I think we're getting closer, and I'd love feedback on the decision-making structure that you're seeing us put in place. But I don't know if that's a conversation you want to have right now. If it is, I'm all for it. If it isn't, what's on your mind?
Well, I just wanted to make sure that we tie the loose ends from the last conversation. Basically, we were at the end of the discussion or the meeting last time, and there were a number of questions that were asked. So I was going to take this opportunity to answer some of those questions and just again raise the question about how can Persia be part of OpenSSF, and I understand that some of the finer details need to be ironed out. But I think, I mean, from where I see, we have what we need for Persea's sake, and so I think it might make sense to talk about it.
If you have answers to some of the past questions, I would love, by all means, share those answers or a presentation if you have it. I think we can turn on screen sharing.
Yeah, I will share my screen.
Yeah, and while Sundra is getting set up, just a couple things I want to highlight. So, first of all, I want to welcome some of the folks who are interested in the Persia project and join us for the call. So we have Chris Benson and Eric Sedlar from Oracle who joined the TAC call, and they're interested in collaborating on the Persia project. So thank you both for joining. We published the full presentation from last week. So just at a high level, what we're proposing is building a binary distribution network to solve specifically the problems of how we can do peer-to-peer distribution of secure libraries, and also how we can do multi-node verification of source builds to improve the security of open source libraries that are being used as dependencies up the chain for large corporations. What we wanted to, a couple other things I just want to highlight before we get into questions, and feel free to skip through some of the slides, Sudhindra. One thing is, I think as a project, we highly value openness and transparency. So we're making sure that we do everything in the open as part of published meetings on the OpenSSF calendar that are being recorded, and then having different voices from companies, including Docker, Deploy Hub, IBM, and other companies who have been joining us. We have some independent folks as well who are joining us and contributing either PRs or code or ideas for the project. And also, we're also, another important goal for us on the project is to make sure that we are collaborating and working together with other OpenSSF projects like SigStore and other ongoing efforts. So I think this is also something which we're striving to do, is to build a project which is well integrated with the overall OpenSSF ecosystem. And the last thing, and this is why we want to go through the Q&A, is obviously we're driving towards having an initial release and MVP, which folks can start to use specifically for a Docker use case around the project. But we're open as well to input and feedback from the TAC and other folks so that we can have the best design and map out the best roadmap. So it's a project which aligns with the OpenSSF goals, but then solves some of the larger industry problems which we're all seeing from our customers and in the security ecosystem. Okay, and I'm going to pass it over to Sudhindra to talk through some of the questions which came up in our presentation to the governing board last week.
Yeah,
or 2 weeks ago.
And yeah, thank you, Steve. So I captured a few because they cover the broad set of questions, but every single question that was asked in the way it was asked has been answered in a doc, which is at the bottom of this slide deck, and I'll throw it in the Slack channel and chat as well, so that and this is by no means end to the conversation. This is like, thank you for these questions. Let's talk more, and please bring all these kind of questions to us, because this allows us to sort of peel through the layers and delve deeper. So one of the questions was, is Persia a new package manager? And this was asked in a couple of different ways, but I try to answer this at a high level. So if you think of it, it might seem that it is actually a package manager because that's how people are interacting with it. But the goal is not to be just a repository and say, oh, if you wanted a binary, come to Persia, but be a really good delivery mechanism, which is resilient to single point of failure, which is resilient to network distribution, and all the good things that happen when people are working in different time zones and different regions. If you are not able to read all of this, don't rush at reading it. I'll share the document which has the same text. So for fetching images, how will this work with CLIs such as Docker? Actually, the first integration that we have built is to be transparent so that you can still continue to do Docker while Persia comes in the background and provides you the peer-to-peer distribution mechanism. So your CI/CD systems don't have to change. There is no line that has to change in that code because that is from our experience and our data, that is the heavy lift. People will be more and more resilient they will not be able to change their CI/CD systems. They will be able to change their developer code more easily. But CI/CD systems will need to integrate with Docker, Podman, and whatever is native to that ecosystem. Another question that was asked is, what kind of blockchain are we implementing? So there are multiple constraints on how Persia works and how Persia will, how people will put their trust in what is coming out of Persia. So having a public right is quickly not an option, and we are looking at building a partial Byzantine fault-tolerant system where we have authoritative rights but public reads. What we see as being done, thousands of times is verification and reading that blockchain versus writing to it, and the rights we would like to control it through only the trusted registry nodes that are carefully added to the system. And Brian made this comment, so I thought it was really apropos to the discussion. And there are a couple more questions I'll cover. How about, how does the contribution structure look like? I think anyone who wants to join the team and has enough background and has been onboarded will get merge rights. So they act as a full team member. They send PRs, they approve PRs and review PRs. But for anything that is production grade, people are given permissions based on what they need. Like if you are going to install or deploy something in the cloud, then we will give you permissions to operate on that cloud and so on. But it's not blanket, but it's not restricted to privileged members. It's shared with all the companies that are participating. And then there was one last question that I wanted to cover. So there was a comment actually. It said that, oh, based on the criteria that was presented in the PRs before, it seems like Persia qualifies for sandbox project, and I think the same as well. Like Persia qualifies for sandbox project because it satisfies all the criteria there, and it may satisfy more criteria for as part of being the incubation project, but not all of them. So we don't want to just skip steps and just be considered for incubation. I think we want to start where it is appropriate to start, do the sandbox stuff. We'll bring more companies on board. They'll use it in production. We'll learn from that. So we hope that we have an MVP early summer, not September, early summer. And then we'll engage with companies to start using it, get us real life feedback and move forward. And so as we have more traction, I think it makes sense to graduate from one stage to the other instead of jumping. And this is the Google Doc. I'll throw the link in the chat as well.
So while Sunendra's been chatting, I've been watching the chat, and I'm going to answer some of those questions. But I saw Ava had their hands raised, so I wanted to give them a chance to speak first.
That is partially for the question I asked, which if you're going to get to, I'll let you get to that. And partially just to remind on a time check, we do have one more agenda item. So if we could try to get through the questions in just a few minutes, I know we've lost most of the staff at this point, but the last agenda item is kind of a sneaky news that I think would be good for us all to chat about for a few minutes. So maybe if you can keep it to 4 minutes, then we can wrap up.
Yeah,
in
no,
the
I
last
can
5.
quickly answer the questions, and then if anyone who asked a question doesn't feel like my answer fully answers what they were asking, then please speak up. Okay, so one of the questions / discussions was what problem Percy is solving for the package management community, and I think that there are some systems which are more robust, some which are single point of failures, and it was also pointed out in the discussion that, for example, Docker Hub, some other central repositories really don't have a good fallback when they go down. And one of the things which we've seen at JFrog is, this is no longer the case, but for example, before Microsoft purchased NPM, it was like a denial of service attack against the whole developer community. So this is something which we think a peer-to-peer solution does solve at scale if it's well supported. And I think something else, this gets to another question, which was about the BFT and the resource utilization of it. So in the network, there will be nodes run by companies, such as the member companies I mentioned, JFrog, Docker, Deploy Hub, etc. These will be the nodes which participate in consensus for the BFT algorithm. The general nodes, so if you're running a node mostly for distribution purposes or just to pull down builds, you'll be able to access and read the chain, the full immutable transaction history, but you're not participating in consensus. So the set of nodes participating in BFT will be very limited based upon the number of member companies, but you can think it's in the dozens at most, 100 at scale. So it's a very small set of nodes that are working on the consensus algorithm that supports potentially tens of thousands or even millions of consumers of the immutable transaction history. Okay, so I think that solves most of the questions which were asked. Were there any follow-on questions folks had, which I can better answer if you ask it directly now?
I think, so one thing that comes to mind is, even though you answer those questions, it's the resources that are going to be spent on this system versus maybe just funding or like helping those package managers hubs be more reliable. I guess that's a question seems legitimate to ask, because I think your proposal is like a multi-year proposal, and it's going to take a lot of engineering resources. And I think maybe we should be discussing whether,
yeah. So I think this isn't an either or proposal. So we also run essentially a repository for C and C++ development, the Conan Center, which we're going to continue to support and invest in, and it's important for the C and C++ community. At the same time, I think if you look down the road, 5 years or more in the future, having a decentralized system for distribution has a lot of advantages, and in general, it's a technology which solves this problem at scale and without single points of failures or reliance on a lot of funding. A decentralized system where all the nodes are helping with the distribution is highly resilient to individual companies or individual nodes going down. So I think what we're doing is we're supporting the current ecosystem, even from other efforts we're doing at JFrog, but then building a system which we believe in the future will be quite scalable and reliable to support that. Did that answer your question, Lauren, or address it?
I'm going to call time on this one, just so that we can spend 5 minutes on the last item that looks a little urgent, or at least time sensitive. So Jeff, you added this. Would you like to share a verbal update on it?
Sure, thank you, Ava. And yes, I put a link in the document. I can share screen, but we're really limited on time, so I'll just do a quick observation. There's a number of online news sources that are picking up on a Google blog about a contribution of a scanning technology to work against devastating malicious packages. And Google in the OpenSSF Package Analyst Project aims to reduce security risks by creating developers crazy package updating schedules. And this is something that I was surprised to see out in the news. I did click to the link of the Google blog, and it ties back to both the security blog posting, but also a posting that's up on the OpenSSF Package Analyst Project site. And it seems to reference that this is something that was the focus of a working group, but I've not been able to find any documentation on this being discussed at any working group recently. I could be wrong, but I asked the colleagues to check as well. So this is kind of concerning to me, because this is sort of not unlike some of the activities of about a year back when things were loosely structured during the pandemic. So I just wanted to make the TAC aware and start a healthy discussion.
Yeah, I can give. Oh, Vicky has a hand up, so maybe she should go.
Well, Abhishek has been really good about answering some questions in the document. So we've got documented answers in there. So thank you, Abhishek, for that. But seeing this, thank you, Jeffrey, for bringing this to our attention there. And but this brings up two questions. Number one, how did this get out without anyone hearing about it? I do think that this will be rectified to a large extent once OpenSSF has marketing people on board, which I think is something that they were working on, but I don't know whether that's been derailed by Alpha Omega hiring. And number two is something that Jason and I were discussing while working on the vulnerabilities charter, the VD charter, is that this is a technical thing that has gone out into the world, and the TAC didn't get any say into it. And the TAC is the technical advisory committee for OpenSSF and has oversight over all of these things. So we got to figure out a process to make sure that when working groups have something to release before it goes out in the wild world, it comes through the TAC first. So that's something that I think is a great thing for future calls.
Yep, I would strongly agree with that. I think there is a broader question of the work being done in the OpenSSF under the OpenSSF name that goes out publicly or to policy recommendations that the TAC has no visibility directly into, even if one or two TAC members sometimes get pulled in. For example, I can speak to a little bit of that organization, the Policy Planning Board, PPB. There is a governing board level committee. So it's higher up in the org chart than the TAC, chartered to address and release policy opinions when the government asks for an opinion. A few of us are members, but it's not broadly visible here because it's a governing board committee, but at least that is a known organizational structure. I think we need a lot more clarity on this as a whole, but I think we all agree on that. Jeff, thank you so much for raising this here, just for visibility.
Well, and I wanted to just thank you, Ava, and I just wanted to make a final comment. I'm not bringing this up because I want the TAC to become, upset, or I want folks to become, punitive about this. But I also don't want to assume things like, oh, this was just because we don't have marketing staff.
Yeah.
This to me is highly inappropriate behavior. And it is going to eventually potentially cause significant problems. And so what I'd ask the TAC to do is someone to take an action item to do some due diligence against how did this really happen? Because David Wheeler's not with us on the call. Maybe he has a very good explanation. He had to leave, but I'd really like to see a specific action item taken by the TAC to investigate this on a polite and professional manner and disclose how this happened so it won't happen again.
One thing I wanted to understand, why do you feel that the process was not followed? Like, it was discussed in the working group. It was kind of a dormant project for more than a year. We started working on it.
So we're at time. I'll answer that quickly, Abhishek. A working group under the norms of most open source foundations and other Linux Foundation projects, a working group doesn't have authority to speak for the entire foundation. Full stop. In the Confidential Computing Consortium, the TAC always reviews things that are going to become press releases and represent anything that will publicly represent the technical opinion of the entire foundation goes through the TAC for approval. Because the TAC is the technical oversight body or technical advisory body of the foundation. It'd be like if I went out and did a press release or did an interview and said, my opinion represents the entire foundation. It doesn't, and I know that. Working groups should not be doing that.
And I would just add, Abhishek, that again, this could be the best technology ever, and we could find great value in it and be very appreciative. But I struggled to some degree to get IBM to officially join the OpenSSF in the fall, even though I was very passionate in my support of it, because during the pandemic, when this organization wasn't funded, there was a lot of ad hoc activity flying around. And that type of activity creates impressions on the part of the fellow members, and it makes it feel like this isn't a level playing field. So again, I'm not trying to say there were bad actions, or I'm not trying to point fingers, but this is representative of the activity of a year ago that made the OpenSSF more of a questionable organization. And with the new board and the new TAC and everything starting to kind of come into 2.0, I'd like to continue to see the positive momentum. And thank you to the TAC for considering my item.
And thank you, Jeff, for raising some very good points.
I'm happy to get it more structured, so totally agree with it. So in the future, if you feel like, hey, all the product releases should go through the TAC, that's totally okay. But it hasn't been in the past, and if you feel there is a need to structure that, we can definitely do that. So totally agree with that.
Apologies for running the meeting over. Thank you all so much for the good discussions today. See you in a few weeks.